Today on Power Forward, we learn how to be strategic. What goes into building a solid solar installation business strategy? And how should I be strategy planning for 2023? Here to help us is Robert Wolff, VP of Strategy with Baywa RE. Hey, Robert, thanks for taking the time today.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Before we get into the meat of the discussion, just curious if you could give us a little bit of your background and maybe answer what is a VP of Strategy?
Previous to Baywa, I was the general manager of a pretty large solar company in the US, top 12. Before that was with a very large public company doing B2B sales on distribution. Before that was with a product integrator, and then a little stint at a little company called Solar City back in the day. Jumping to my role as VP of Strategy and what that is. But my goal is to build out a long-term strategy for Baywa, and that opens up a lot of questions that I think that we'll get into here real quick.
As I was jotting down my list of questions for the discussion today, I guess it occurred to me that strategy planning for 2023 is really two discussions. There's just generally what are the questions to ask to reflect on the year, to build a strategy in any year. And then I guess number two is what's unique about 2023 and beyond. Obviously, there's a lot going on in the solar industry. So does that change anything about how we're answering the questions from number one? So let's start at that square one peg.
Mhm.
How does someone know, I guess, when they should start building a strategy for their business?
I always say, if you're thinking about building a strategy, I'd suggest doing something about it. It is a very broad topic with a lot of research, a lot of smart minds that have looked into this topic. Basically, the market is a lot of volatility, and it continues to be. And every installer wants to find a way to kind of navigate those challenges in a kind of profitable, streamlined, efficient way. And I feel, building out a 1 to 3 to 5, depending on your comfortability, right, around a strategic plan, is a great tool to do that. It's really going to help you retain employees, right, build business culture, deliver the unique solutions to your customers, and really maintain strong, connected partnerships, which are critical. So basically aligning your business to a certain set of actions through a unique system of activities to achieve a goal. In a short term, that is strategy, right? But there's lots to unpack there.
Lots to unpack. So I guess let's keep trying to unpack it a little bit. How do you advise solar installers to approach a year-end assessment and then some of this forward-looking planning?
You asked a key piece here, Chris. So looking forward always requires looking backwards. When solar installers are looking to build a strategy, they first must look at, what has happened in the past year, which this year has been very interesting, just like every other year, I feel, with different sets of challenges, some similar, but, very unique in a sense that this year has been very challenging. I think when we look back, right, kind of asking the questions, how did your company function this past year, right? You can break that out in a bunch of different ways, financially, process-wise, employees, obviously with inflation and what happened, lots of challenges there. Some other questions like, was your team aligned, right, of where you were going, how you were going to get there? Bigger questions around what could you have done better? I feel like every company is kind of striving to be better. Does everyone agree how you're going to make improvements to the business? Making sure that folks are aligned with how you are making those improvements. And what more could have, leadership done in order to lead? You'll kind of see peppered throughout this. I'll go back to leadership because it is a critical piece. So for most companies, the answer is going to be no, or sort of, or we did okay, right? I think are some of the responses. But for a lot of these, questions, that's where you start, right? And so understand the past, so that way you can kind of plan for next year and the years to come.
And, this is Power Forward after all. So now let's transition to that forward outlook. What forward-looking planning should be happening right now? I mean, we're chatting November 3rd right now, the year end, thinking about going forward. And then you even mentioned like the 3 to 5 year window. I guess just in general, like what should be happening right now?
And I don't want to scare people by saying 5 years. I think, I met with a customer last night and 2 years is enough for them. So let's not scare everybody with 5. So that's why I started with 1 to 3, but 5 would be great, but it's a little bit too much. But yeah, I mean, honestly, like forward-looking planning is my favorite part, right? I tend to be direct about that. And first things first, the company needs to understand who they are, right? Where they want to go and how they're going to get there. Those are obviously very large questions to ask. But no strategy is valuable unless you know the answers to those questions, which can open up some difficult conversations personally and internally within the business. So being able to answer these discovery questions like, where do you want your company to be in 1 to, I won't say 5, but let's say 1 to 3 years, right? Financially, geographically, culturally, operationally, you can break it down to all your different organizations or departments. Do you understand who your company is to your customers, to your employees, to your partners? Are you informed about current policy and market trends? Where are you getting that information? Are you connected to Calcea or any other types of organizations in order to understand policy trends? What is your unique value proposition to your customers, and how are you differentiated in your market? That's a large question to ask, but critical. Do you have all of your operational process flows mapped out, right? As folks scale and they bring on new talent and new people, having those mapped out so that way, new employees have the right set of tools in order to do their role is very important. So all these pieces and a lot more, right, are critical to kind of start to build out that strategy approach.
You got into it a little bit there, because the tricky part of this discussion is just how drastically different approaches can be based on the installer, their size, their geography. So it's tough to get too specific, but can you maybe walk us through some standout caveats or key questions installers can think about in relation to their specific company, their specific niche?
We all know that not every strategy is a one size fit all kind of approach. So I'm glad you call that out. Each company needs to apply a strategic process to their own attributes. One of the most important aspects in this is understanding the scope, right? So questions like, why is it important for your leadership team to build a strategy? What's the value of a strategy for your company, your employees, your customers? What commitment is it going to require from different members of your team? Who's really going to drive the strategy development and execution? It's so important to think about the scope of building and aligning to a strategy. So often I see businesses build a strategy and think it's going to fix all their problems. It just isn't. Then 3 months later, down the road, everyday work kind of catches up with everybody, and then strategy is forgotten. So, commitment to strategy requires constant check-ins, an insane amount of accountability across different departments, and the discipline really is paramount. And once again, I call back leadership is critical.
So now thinking a bit more specifically about 2023, I was going to say, how worried should I be about the ongoing module supply questions and stuff like that? But that's not really the point of the discussion today. So instead, assume I'm an installer of a certain size who, is worried about supply of my preferred module or a specific battery brand. How do I build a strategy that best reflects that and protects me from that concern?
It's different for every installer. But I think the important parts here are you a customer or a partner with your supplier? The level of engagement on both sides will drive more success. Are you forecasting your demand with your supply partners? Right, lead times continue to be an issue. So really demand planning, forecasting is key there. Some other things are, what is your change order process if you need to swap out modules? I feel like a lot of companies are doing that, and it's important to understand that process from an operational standpoint. But we can spend more many hours discussing that. Where do you get your policy information from? Obviously, policy is driving a lot of the industry, and are you engaged with those, local solar policy advocate groups to kind of better educate you, so you can make those educated decisions around, your supply and where that's coming from, and having a clear understanding of the impacts of each of these, right, has on your business will really help installers strategize supply. But these are just some of the pieces to the puzzle.
What if I'm an installer that's concerned that I'll make mistakes when building a strategy, right? Are there any major mistakes that you can recommend avoiding as you're building this out?
It's a funny thing, right? People get it mixed up so often with other kind of business initiatives. So one thing I see is folks setting goals or targets and using them as strategy. Strategy is not a plan. It's essentially a framework, right, for decision making to alter behavior. So asking the real questions of, why are we doing X? Or does it align with adding value to our unique approach to our business? I also see that installers will often create a strategy, but then not set up the framework or support to carry it through, right? The execution side. So regular check-ins to make sure your operations are aligned to the strategy are very helpful. Building a strategy is great, but really the discipline to execute it should be taken as, as or if not more seriously.
I'll be transparent. I think in my mind, I was confusing strategy with planning a little bit when I prepared for this. So I
Right.
can see how that would be a common, mistake. And I think it makes sense to separate them, like you said, because even when you're thinking about the installers and anyone who would be worried about building that 5-year plan, that that's always not a good thing, right? To even planning out that far ahead because you never know what's going to happen, especially in the solar coaster. But the strategy can adapt and it kind of be a more everlasting thing than what that plan is. Anyway, and you've mentioned this a couple times, leadership, right? Preparing a great strategy requires leadership. And when building that new strategy, I guess it would never hurt to borrow from other great leaders and minds who've kind of already done a lot of this thinking and execution. Are there resources you could recommend for installers, seeking to do this and lead their own strategy?
Yeah, there's actually a number of great books out there and articles. One that's been really important for me is Michael Porter. He's kind of I don't want to say godfather, but that's kind of what some people have said around strategy. He really dives into kind of the unique activities that are required in order to build out a strategy. Some of the trade-offs, right? Saying no is is equally as important as saying yes to certain things within the business. Reinforcing kind of fit activities in order to be efficient are a lot of the pieces that he talks about. And then another one is James Collins, also known Jim Collins. I don't know, for some reason he uses James and Jim, but I really like his hedgehog concept and his flywheel concept. So those are the things that I'm really diving into right now to better understand some of those concepts that he's been writing about.
Before we wrap up, just any other areas of strategic planning you'd like to cover? Like, what else do you feel installers miss when they're thinking about their own business or the market opportunities that could maybe help them build a better strategy?
The industry is becoming more and more competitive. And so building a 1 to 2 to 3 year strategy will help elevate your business and ultimately the business that comes your way, right? In any relationship, both sides want the best. So if you're not being your best, how will you kind of attract that? Companies should always be looking for ways to differentiate and ultimately deliver unique, valuable solutions to their customers. To reference kind of Michael Porter here, strategy renders choices about what not to do as important as choices about what to do. So asking those critical questions to your leaders and to your team will only enable you to be better at your job, right, and growing your company.
I like that quote a lot. On that note, Robert, just thanks for making the choice yourself to join us today on Power Forward and helping us kind of figure out everything about strategy building, the difference between that and planning, and just thanks for taking the time today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.